finals, I think, and they actually didn't have a regular number 9, if you like. I'd have loved to have played for Barcelona.
Ah, that's interesting.
The team beat us in the finals, I think, and they actually didn't have a regular number 9, if you like. I think that team, that obviously it'd be easier to play in that team, but I think that would have suited me because the way they played and they were so difficult to play against.
Was that ever a prospect?
It was a little bit, but I think financially it was difficult for them as well. But and that's a game which we'll get into during the season. The period where I was looking to leave, and I'll get into the reasons behind that as well. That was a possibility.
What European team?
Right, Wayne, what are we doing here today?
Filming promo.
Yeah.
Promo for new podcast. Me and Mark Obridge.
What's the podcast called, Wayne?
I don't know. What is it called?
The house is incredible, absolutely massive. This is what you get when you are one of the greatest footballers that's ever played the game. But practically, I'm thinking, who cuts the grass? Technology. Oh, that was good.
Right.
Wayne as a player, exactly what Man United was all about. But I'm sure we're not going to agree on everything.
What would you think about Mark if you were a current player?
Probably think he's a twat.
Into all the games. Do you do your own painting in your house? All the big stories.
Well, I just had my socks on and my underpants.
Good. Hopefully no sackings.
Yeah, I hope not. He's gone first on both of them. I think we will have debates.
That's what I was saying, you can go first.
I did.
On the volley.
United.
Oh, perfect.
On the pitch, off the pitch.
When you see that drip there.
I actually like that. I thought that would have been a nice little effect.
I've got a little goal in my garden. I'd have saved that, to be honest.
Stick to United. It's coming soon. And you'll see me and Mark making ourselves look like a dickhead again. Like this.
Yeah, hi everyone. This new Tyga Starface album, it's not music. Yeah, here we have a brand new record from rapper, songwriter Tyga, a guy who across hip-hop's mainstream cultural crest in the 2010s was buoyed by some really massive hits, but simultaneously over the course of his career failed to really forge anything that you could even say was even close to like a classic album. And while Tyga is not completely forgotten in the modern hip-hop meta, that's for sure, things over the past 10 plus years have shifted within rap so radically from an aesthetic standpoint, from a musical standpoint. It's hard to imagine a place right now where a Tyga type of rapper could really succeed and thrive and grow their audience commercially, which again I think is the reason why we haven't seen him going viral in recent years like we have in the past. I mean, if Tyga had to start today, I don't know if a song like Rack City would really take off. So from a commercial standpoint, I personally, as a critic, am not surprised to find, and certainly don't begrudge Tyga, the feeling or the itching, burning desire to maybe switch things up and try something new, because no matter what genre you operate in order to stay on top in the music industry, especially long term, eventually you've got to switch it up, you've got to evolve, you've got to change with the times. And maybe on some level Tyga has been struggling with that answer as to what to do next, but I think recently he discovered exactly what he wants to do. The solution, as it were, came in the form, I presume, of a song that not only has been going viral on the internet, but actually climbing the charts in recent weeks too. That would be the new Phoenix Flexin track, Rubbers. A very odd song from this West Coast artist who at one point was mostly known for his involvement with the rap group Shoreline Mafia. But with this solo track, Phoenix was doing nothing of the sort in terms of, that group's typical style, which is typically this very kind of anxious, intense take on trap music, hyphy, and gangster rap. But no, Phoenix Flexin's Rubbers actually embraces a little bit more of a mystical, dazzling 80s synth pop sound, which obviously took a lot of longtime fans and now a lot of new listeners as well by complete surprise, because again, this is not his usual thing. So of course, some skeptics started coming around, wondering what exactly was the source of this sonic shift, especially given the vocals on the track sound almost nothing like any vocal Phoenix has laid onto any song previously. Now, of course, very quickly, allegations of this song being AI generated began to crop up, and for weeks and weeks and weeks from Phoenix and his collaborators, we saw denial after denial, explanation after explanation as to why the AI allegations were false. But after more allegations, more digging, and even some exposure, eventually Phoenix did come around and admit AI was actually used in the process of generating Rubbers. And given the lack of transparency we have seen about that up until now, it's probably more AI than even now he is letting on. But while Phoenix was struggling, trying to figure out his next move and how exactly he was going to spin this whole AI thing, clearly Tyga was silently plotting behind the scenes, figuring out how he could, one, also put out some AI music that would climb the charts, and two, maybe base a whole album cycle around it too, which he very clearly has. Now, since the release of this record, it has come out that Tyga did actually use AI in the creative process, but even he was not completely honest with this fact out of the gate with this Starface record. And while we don't have full details on that yet, personally, I'm inclined to believe that it's probably more than he's willing to let on, just like Phoenix. In fact, there are elements of the 10 tracks on this album that lead me to believe that they are entirely wholly AI generated, which I will get into, but first, let me say this. Presuming charitably that this album was only 25% AI generated and quantify that however you want. The fact still remains that this record serves as an example of the most disgusting and annoying and cynical use case for this technology, insofar as using it to just generate music and upload it to the internet. Because here you have an artist who clearly is at a complete loss as to what to do in terms of the next step of his career. And so what does he do? He just looks at the charts and picks the one thing that stands out in terms of a new direction or trend or sound that's grabbing some people's ears, and then heads to what is essentially a musical Xerox and just pumps out 10 random, low-grade, low-effort songs and just plops it onto streaming. Like, literally the act of treating music purely like a commodity, purely like a product, a commercial product, like a consumable, flavorless, industrial goop that you just package and put on the store shelf for a super cheap price so as many people buy it as possible. This album is the reduction of the artistic, of the creative process, simply down to that. It's a simple, cliche formula followed by a machine, and then has Tyga's name slapped on top of it, except not really, because in order to justify this genre shift, Tyga came up with this whole different persona, this Starface persona, not only in order to sell people on this musical change here, but also, I think, to give himself personally a bit of a degree of separation, because really, truly, how much of him is actually going into this project? Let's get into the sound and direction of this album, though. Look, this is essentially the record that you would be handed if you went into any generative music platform and typed in the term 80s with a bunch of other tags and just repeated that process over and over and over and over. Because as somebody who actually loves and is passionate about a lot of 80s music, there's no real one direction or sound or style or influence that is kind of like a continuous thread through all of these songs. This is a record that would only feel consistent and would only feel thematic to you if you were looking at the 80s from a bird's eye view, maybe even from a lack of experience, like you didn't live through any segment of 80s music at all. So to you, yeah, maybe at a distance, contemporary R&B and synth funk and synth pop and new jack swing and new wave and freestyle. Maybe all of these genres sound the same to you because, again, these were all sounds and styles that were prevalent throughout the 1980s, and if you lived during that time, all of these genres were very distinct movements that were super separate, for the most part separate, and had very distinct pioneers and artists that were at the forefronts of these movements. And through Tyga releasing this album that is just this complete mishmash of ill-defined 80s slop, it sort of creates this closed loop where the reference points are kind of scuffed, and you're not actually doing this out of celebration or out of adoration for the artists who created these sounds and styles in the first place. Instead, what you end up getting is a series of tracks that have no consistency, no vision, no direction, and just sound like watered-down versions of the most popular, most accessible things that sort of represent that era musically. So you have songs on this thing that sound like a much worse version of like a Prince hit or two. Almost like you took Steve Lacy and at gunpoint forced him to record 3, 4, 5 Prince ripoffs in the studio. You've got tracks on this thing where the synths and bass lines feel like a blatant Rick James ripoff. And if you're at all familiar with 80s hits, or especially like novelty 80s hits, you know how weird and corny anomalies like Eddie Murphy's Party All the Time are. And yet so much of the material on this album feels like an even weaker version of that. Not to mention on at least several songs here, I'm kind of getting big Rockwell, Somebody's Watching Me vibes too. It feels like whatever AI Tyga used to generate the production on this record was just trained on a sampler of like the biggest 80s hits, and that's it. So like, not only is the vagueness, the lack of specificity in terms of how this record approaches 80s vibes kind of a tell in terms terms of it being AI, but also consistently across this record. You have these like kind of scratchy, scuffed vocals where it sounds like on song after song, the highs have been like kind of rolled off, like the treble is super low and the vocals are a little muddy, which is an effect I imagine kind of comes by way of these programs being trained on so much older music where the production and recordings aren't so clear. And there is kind of a vintage scratchiness and dustiness to the way some of the instrumentation, especially the vocals, sound. But then to hear that carry over onto these modern iterations of these styles through these generated pieces of music, it just feels very out of place, anachronistic. Not only that, but there are like some very weird, off-putting production choices that just don't really make sense. Like basic engineering shit that just would not come up on an album like this for a few reasons. One being that any producer or engineer who can genuinely recreate these kind of vintage 80s vibes and sounds with the accuracy that they are shown with here, that would have to be a pretty talented, knowledgeable, veteran producer with quite a bit of experience and a good ear. Someone who probably wouldn't put out 3, 4, 5 busted ass vocal mixes or do song after song where random drum hits and fills are like 2, 3 times louder than almost anything else going on in the mix. Not only that, but another tell that I would say kind of gives this album's AI generation away is, of course, the vocals. There are numerous hooks and tracks on this thing where Tyga's vocal phrasing, for somebody who is like a studied and an accomplished pop rapper who literally raps, writes, and flows purely for catchiness and accessibility, is putting out vocal line after vocal line on this record that is just painfully awkward. Like leaning into certain syllables or leaving certain gaps in a line unfilled rhythmically in a way that I feel like an accomplished, successful pop rapper just wouldn't, or even a singer who saw any level of commercial success. Like his phrasing and the way that many of his words have this sort of staccato feel, like they're a little cut off, just feels very, I mean, for lack of a better term, robotic. It just feels like a robot version of Tyga singing and talk singing on most of these tracks, all of these tracks. Then the other thing is just how mind-numbingly repetitive lyrically a lot of these songs are, and it does not come off like, you know, a genuine human infatuation. More like, again, a robot that has been given very few shreds of information to go off of, which is why there are so many moments that are making reference to getting broken up with and counting money, counting money, counting money, counting money until your thumbs hurt. It's to the point sometimes where I have to check the track list just to make sure I'm not listening to the same song all over again. The only real sense of variation for me personally is how bad some of the mixing is. And look, while I will admit there are some choruses and there are some baseline musical elements on these tracks that are like at least accessible or kind of catchy, or I can kind of squint and see possibly in my mind's eye a catchier, more enjoyable version of what is being presented here in actuality. The fact is, even when these songs are at their most enjoyable, there's a very stiff, awkward, weird, off-putting, almost uncanny quality about them that sort of just makes my skin crawl and makes me wish I was kind of like, you know, listening to all of the obvious reference points and inspirations. And that, I think, is the most sad, pitiful, and unfortunate reality of this situation, that there will be some people who listen to this, genuinely think it's great, and have no clue, no idea, no experience of any of the 80s artists that it's ripping off. Or hell, even the modern artists who are still like carrying the torch for sounds like this. Guys like Dame Funk, for example, who, if Tyga or any number of artists wanted to randomly make like a synth funk record, something along those lines, I mean, give that guy a call. That guy will cook you up some amazing production in that style. If as an artist, that's truly the sound that you want to chase, the direction that you want to go in, Call someone up, reach out, find somebody, collaborate, make a friend. Enjoy music as the communal experience and the cultural exchange that it's supposed to be, instead of having an AI platform fart out some crap. Because again, I'm sorry, if you know or you enjoy or are passionate about anything in terms of like 80s music, and it feels like there is at least like a hunger for that in this day and age, with, you know, the resurgence of Michael Jackson's music, with, you know, artists like The Weeknd currently thriving off of all of these 80s vibes on his recent records. Even before Rubbers, there has been an established resurgence for this kind of vibe, this kind of sound. If it's something that you really want to do, go for it in a way that's true and authentic and unique to you as an artist, instead of doing lame shit like this, where even in this record's promotion, Tyga can't help but make it clear that he knows absolutely fucking nothing about this era and all the musical styles that he's pulling from. Because again, to sort of bring it back to the Starface persona, like it's clearly built off of Scarface, because for Tyga, his personal reference point for these genres of music has more to do with like an old gangster movie than it does the music scenes from decades ago that they actually fucking came out of. Tyga wants people to draw the same sort of cultural connections to these sounds that he does. It has nothing to do with, you know, New York. It has nothing to do with California. It has nothing to do with Minneapolis, and has everything to do with, like, you know, dudes who were wearing fancy suits and doing cocaine in Miami in the 80s. Fuck you. So again, to close this video out, I just want to repeat, what grosses me out most about this record is that it's just very lazy, it's very cynical, it's very opportunistic, and it highlights to us the exact kind of artist who is going to thrive most due to this technology. A boring, uncreative hack with no inspiration, no work ethic, no passion, no drive, no ideas of his own, who would rather just use a machine to steal ideas from other artists instead of daring to find a way to genuinely express himself and make music that's worth listening to. Which is why this Tyga project here is not music.
The Batman fans, there is a huge rumor going around that the Batman Part 2 and Part 3 are being filmed at the same time. This is not uncommon for the biggest superhero projects of all time that require big scale and scope and action, but I feel like this is pretty surprising for the Batman franchise, but also not at the same time. If this is the case, the Matt Reeves Batman universe would probably completely end with the Batman Part 3, Whereas I feel like when the universe initially started, we all thought that we were going to be able to get spin-off movies and TV shows, but it seems like the Penguin will be the only one. That is very sad. I do feel like with the direction that the DC universe overall is going in, it very much is hindering what Matt Reeves is able to do with this expansive Batman universe. This news would justify the release date push that we just got, but also just why the film took so long to develop, because they were filming 2 movies at the same time, or maybe they didn't even know that they were gonna be greenlit to make 2 movies or make 1 movie. They probably just didn't know what the fuck was going on at all at DC. I wouldn't take what I'm saying about the Matt Reeves universe ending super harshly, because with the track that the DC universe is on, Clayface coming out, Supergirl flopping, Man of Tomorrow next summer, the merger that might or might not happen, we have no idea what is going on with the future of DC projects at all. So everything is up in the air right now. The Batman fans, there is a huge rumor going around that the Batman Part 2 and Part 3 are being filmed at the same time. This is not uncommon for the biggest superhero projects of all time that require big scale and scope and action, but I feel like this is pretty surprising for the Batman franchise, but also not at the same time. If this is the case, the Matt Reeves Batman universe would probably completely end with the Batman Part 3, whereas I feel like when the universe initially started, we all thought that we were going to be able to get spin-off movies and TV shows, but it seems like the Penguin will be the only one. That is very sad. I do feel like with the direction that the DC universe overall is going in, it very much is hindering what Matt Reeves is able to do with this expansive Batman universe. This news would justify the release date push that we just got, but also just why the film took so long to develop, because they were filming 2 movies at the same time, or maybe they didn't even know that they were gonna be greenlit to make 2 movies or make 1 movie. They probably just didn't know what the fuck was going on at all at DC. I wouldn't take what I'm saying about the Matt Reeves universe ending super harshly, because with the track that the DC universe is on, Clayface coming out, Supergirl flopping, Man of
A Fistful of Dollars is here on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, released by Arrow Video. It can be found as a limited edition available at UK online retailers. The beginning of the Man with No Name trilogy, or as some refer to it as the Dollars trilogy, is often attributed to putting Clint Eastwood on the proverbial map. A Fistful of Dollars is the first pairing of Eastwood and director Sergio Leone, both of which have become filmmaking legends in their own right. Not to mention the score by the legendary Ennio Morricone. Eastwood's Joe, as he's called in this film, pits two rival factions against one another in a small town. Of course, things don't go according to plan, and it leads to one of the coolest climax shootouts in a Western. A Fistful of Dollars is an excellent Western which changed the genre forever, and is still held in high regard today. I wholeheartedly give this one a recommendation. Even if you've never seen it, it is worth a blind buy. A Fistful of Dollars on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray has an aspect ratio of 235:1 with native 4K resolution, and it supports both HDR10 and Dolby Vision. For purposes of this review, I will be discussing the Dolby Vision transfer. According to the booklet provided by Arrow for this release, their version of the film on 4K utilizes the original 35mm 2perf Technicolor negative, and it was scanned and restored in 4K 16-bit resolution. Exclusively to Arrow, it was also graded in HDR and Dolby Vision. The source for its presentation here was relatively problem-free, no egregious blemishes or imperfections. Arrow's typical strong disc encoding is here, with often above mid-80s in bit rates. Grain resolves well, which to my eyes looked marginally better than on Kino Lorber's SDR-only disc. Speaking of, chances are, if you're watching this review and you have the existing Kino Lorber version, you're looking for the answer if this is indeed a better transfer than that disc. Not to bury the lead, but yes, it is, and there are a few reasons as to why this is so. For starters, the framing on the Arrow disc appears to offer slightly more information on the left and right side of the frame. This is definitely something that will pique the interest of the more hardcore fans of the film, so there is that. The presentation itself on the Arrow version appears to be more filmic, a little darker than what is presented on the Kino disc. It was a little jarring to go back and forth between the two, as the Kino looked almost blown out when compared to Arrow's. This version has a more natural cinematic appearance, which I found to be quite pleasing. In addition, the inclusion of HDR and Dolby Vision offers a more refinement to the overall palette. This leads to my description of a more natural-looking visual space. I did also find this aspect very beneficial. As a whole, the color timing in Arrows, at least to my eyes, wins the day. Black levels also show a more noteworthy improvement. Kino's disc made night scenes and darker interiors not as deep, with minor crush here and there. Here on the Arrow version, they're dialed in better and looked more appropriate. A Fistful of Dollars on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray supports a DTS 5.1 audio mix as well as a 1.0 mono. Both tracks are available in either English or Italian. Typically, I go for the English 5.1 audio mix when I watch the film, and overall, I thought it was a more or less identical track from the Kino version. I also did sample the original mono mix, and I thought that one was presented well from start to finish. Going back to the 5.1 for a moment, the overall sound design can be slightly erratic due to the dubbing nature of the Italian to English overlapping with Eastwood's natural vocals. Some light immersive ambience and action can be heard through the surrounds during the film, but it is limiting from the era and the source elements available at the time. That being said, I still prefer the 5.1, though occasionally the purist in me will want to revisit the film with the original mono. Speaking of the mono, Kino Lorber's disc is 2.0, where here it is 1.0, so just take that for what it's worth. With that said, the mono here is generally clean, problem-free as far as cracks, background hiss, etc. Now, this release from Arrow comes with a whole new slew of extras, as well as legacy content as far as bonus materials go. An interesting observation, though, from my personal end. Since this is a Region B Blu-ray disc, I needed to use my Region Free player for booting up the extras. A weird occurrence happened, as the menu would pop up with nothing actually showing as far as the list of extras themselves. I'm not quite sure if this is an occurrence for just myself, as I don't have any difficulties playing Region B discs previously on this player, but I will be able to determine once the next film in the series arrives if it is in fact my player or a glitch on the disc itself. As such, I'm not able to properly comment on the included extras, but there are numerous both legacy and new offerings to be included, and I will leave a link to what those are in the comments below. For the picture quality, I'm going to give A Fistful of Dollars on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray an A-. I am very pleased with the Arrow video version of the film on 4K, and it's certainly one that easily improves upon Kino's 4K disc. Is it worth it to trade in the old version for this one? In my opinion, yes. I think if you're a true fan of the film, you will enjoy this upgrade. For the audio, I scored it a B. There are more than a few options available as far as audio is concerned, and I think each one offers something of value. The tracks are presented well with no real issues to speak of, and I think
Arrow Video has changed over the past 2 years or so, ever since they got the Warner Brothers deal. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's what we're going to discuss today. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I like Arrow Video, what they've been doing. I actually like it a lot. Arrow Video is still my favorite boutique label. But, you know, a lot of people out there have not liked what Arrow has been doing. It doesn't feel like Arrow Video anymore. You know, they are releasing stuff like Spawn and The Mask and the Clash of the Titans remake and the sequel Wrath, and then of course Swordfish and Excalibur and Demolition Man, Mortal Kombat, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It just doesn't feel like the old Arrow Video, and a lot of people aren't that happy with that. A lot of people, you know, when Arrow releases their new announcements, I've heard a lot of people say, well, that's weird for Arrow Video to be releasing that. And, you know, it wasn't all that long ago when Arrow Video was doing more obscure horror movies, like Lover's Lane, which is a post-Scream slasher, or Edge of the Axe, or The Mutilator, or Slugs. You know, of course they would release better known titles like American Werewolf in London or Reanimator and stuff like that. But for the most part, they did release more obscure horror movies. And I think a lot of horror fans are a little disappointed with Arrow Video lately. And me personally, I don't need everything to be a B-level horror movie to get like these really nice boutique label releases. I actually like the fact that we're getting more movies that aren't horror movies getting the boutique treatment. There's only so many horror movies out there that you can do. And not only that, there's other companies nowadays where they kind of got that category locked down when it comes to obscure horror like Vinegar Syndrome and TerrorVision and whatnot. So I like the fact that Arrow Video is releasing more better known titles, more popular IP titles. I really like the fact that they released this set right here and all the other ones. You know, I don't need every movie in my collection to be horror as far as boutique label goes. But a lot of people don't like what they've been doing. Now, of course, I do miss when they did release the obscure stuff, but I don't think it's necessary. But what do you guys think? Do you guys miss the old Arrow Video from a few years ago, or do you like this new era of Arrow Video? Let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe. See you. Arrow Video has changed over the past 2 years or so, ever since they got the Warner Brothers deal. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's what we're going to discuss today. Now, to be perfectly honest with you,
So welcome to the Crimson Engine. My name is Rubidium. Today we are looking at why producers are the highest paid person on a film set and why everybody wants to be one. Now, you won't be surprised that those two questions go together. It basically breaks down to power, control, and money. So you may have noticed when you're watching some movies with some big stars in them that the stars end up getting a producer credit on the film. Now, why is that? Why does Brad Pitt want to be a producer of his own movies, or why does Christopher Nolan want to produce the movie he's directing? And why does Kevin Feige, who's the president of Marvel Studios, want his name as the producer on all of the movies that he creatively directs? Surely he's a studio head. Is he really coming to set every day and, working out where they're going to buy lunch and, solving power supply problems or, dealing directly with the unions? All of these people want to be producers because that is how you make the most money on a film. There is a great quote from Sean Connery when he started acting in Bond movies in the 60s. He said that I would go to actors' houses and I would see pictures of them on their wall. And then I would go to producers' houses and I would see Picassos and Renoirs on their wall. The idea being that producers, even though actors get all the exposure, they get all the fame, producers walk away with a lion's share of the budget. Now, why is that? Well, a budget for a film is either agreed upon or negotiated or basically put forth by the financiers, usually in Hollywood, the studios. So they say, we have $60 million to shoot this film. We have $100 million to shoot this film. The producer then goes and, as the person responsible for the day-to-day finances of the movie, goes and creates a budget. He or she asks, okay, costume designer, how much will it cost? How much can we get the actors for? And puts together a line item budget. And the studios, that hopefully is the amount of money that the studios said that they can dedicate to the project. Then the producer is given not that amount in a lump sum, but usually that amount over the time that they're going to need it, and they spend the money and deliver the film. If they go over, or they look like they're going to go over, they may be fired even. But if they go under, they essentially get to keep that money as profit. Say they make a $60 million film for $40 million because the quotes that they got turned out to be lower, or the amount of days that they shot turned out to be less. They keep the difference, not always directly into their bank accounts, but they, as long as they come under the amount of money that they budgeted, no one's going to look too hard where the money is going. So if they have if they come under for the cinematography budget and then they put that money into $1 million in C-47s, the studio isn't really going to look twice at that. C-47s are actually closed pegs. They're called C-47s because studios wouldn't pay money for closed pegs because they thought they could just buy them at the store. But producers got very good as the ones controlling the budget at allocating money in a way that benefited them. And if the studio is getting a $60 million film for $60 million, why do they care where the money goes? As long as the film doesn't look cheap or people don't complain, usually no one will look too hard at where the money was spent as long as the product is delivered for that amount. So that's why producers can be notoriously stingy and difficult to get paid from, and they negotiate really hard because they're essentially working with their own money. Meaning that if they can save $1 here and $1,000 there and $1 million there, it ends up in their own pocket. Now they're also going to get a producing fee, and their production company will get a production company fee to cover those overheads. They also might have a development deal if they're big producers, meaning they get a certain amount of money every year from the studio to option projects and develop projects. But you can see really easily how the person who's controlling the budget, the producer, has what you would call moral hazard in allocating that budget, meaning that they have the incentive to allocate more to themselves and less to the film. This is why pretty much big stars and big directors are always producing their own movies. It's not necessarily because they want to make money on the side, though I'm sure some do. It's because if they're the producer, that means they're signing off on where the money is going, and it stops another producer from trying to make their movie as cheaply as possible and then pocketing the difference. If Brad Pitt's the producer of World War Z, for instance, everyone working on the production team is going to be an employee of Plan B, his company, or a friend of his or someone that he trusts. It means that the money is going to end up on the screen or in his pocket. This is so you don't end up with cheap-looking CGI, badly mixed sound, bad music, all of these things that the producer could potentially have budgeted, say, $1 million for music, and then turn around, hire the cheapest bid, and keep the difference for themselves. Producing really boils down to control. Who has the ability to decide where the money is spent? Yes, the director is the ability to say, okay, you stand there and you say this, and I want the wall green, and I want the light to come from this direction. But without a say in how the money is spent, he or she only has the resources available to them. So it's hard to make, Lawrence of Arabia if the producers only got you 10 extras. You need 1,000 or 10,000 extras to make that. So it's not, the director obviously has to be involved with the producer, but if the director is a producer as well, they can guarantee that they're gonna be able to allocate resources where they think that's important to make the movie that they want to make. As a little aside, you may have seen all this PGA behind different people's names. Kevin Feige, PGA, interestingly enough. The PGA is the Producers Guild of America, and it was formed to stop people who aren't involved in the production of the film getting producer credits. So basically, to get PGA after your name, you have to be, pay dues to the Producers Guild, and you have to have been on set a certain number of days, say 80% of the days of the film. Now, if you're a star, or you're Tom Cruise on Mission Impossible, or Brad Pitt on World War Z, you're always going to be on 80% of the days. So that's not a problem for them to get the PGA. But Kevin Feige, I think, is really interesting because, if he's producing 6 films at the same time, how is he on set for all of them? The only way you can do that is if they're all shot in a central location, like Atlanta studios or whatever it is, so that he can just drop in for an hour of every day of every film and get his PGA credit, which allows him to get, I think, residuals in the same way the actors get, a whole bunch of other benefits. There's also the interesting thing of credit jumpers, which is people who angle for a producer credit even though they didn't do any of the producing. They didn't raise the money, they didn't sell the film, they didn't contribute in a meaningful way to producing the film. They were just either someone at the studio, they wrote the book the film's based on. They have the power to negotiate a producer credit even though they weren't one. Harvey Weinstein was notorious for this. He wanted to be listed as a producer on every movie that Miramax and later the Weinstein Company did, even though he was really just writing the check to start with. And the reason was so that if the film won an Oscar, he had the ability to get up on stage and accept the Oscar in front of the whole world and convey this image of power and success that allowed him to get away with his crimes. Not the worst thing that Harvey Weinstein did, but definitely a big thing in Hollywood and something that the PGA was formed to avoid, of legitimate producers